Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, another nice win for the Suns led by their recently acquired big man, plus the big man they've had for a while speaks out. Breaking it down next.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Suns. I'm Brendon Kleen, a staff writer at Awful Announcing and a credentialed Suns media member. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Game Day Monday. Don't forget, Locked On Suns, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button and do what thousands of other Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer and get locked on to the Phoenix Suns right here each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Joining me, as always, from the Wild West Valley, my fellow Suns credentialed media member. How are we feeling on this Monday, Ben Garcia?
Good. I thought that was a pretty good win last night. The Suns wrapping up a pretty easy part of their schedule, and now comes a really daunting task over the next couple of days. So I'm ready to get into it. Ready to get into all of it.
Big homestand this week with, they already won one of them, but then upcoming the Clippers and the Wolves, and then just to make matters even nicer, a road game in San Francisco to wrap it up. But we will talk about the Yusef Nurkic comments. We will talk about the injury, yet another one that hit the Suns, and if that will be lingering and what they can do to adjust in the meantime. But let's start with the game, and let's start with the star of that game, Ben, which was Nick Richards. And this was his second monster performance in only 4 games with the Suns, as in 34 minutes he had 20 points and 19 rebounds. Everybody was trying their best to get him that 2020 game, and the ball unfortunately hit off of his head at the very end, and he didn't get it. But this guy is just, I think, been just about everything you could want if you were one of the people who thought if they fix that center position, things will get a lot better.
I am absolutely one of the people who were clearly just wrong about Nick Richards in a sense of, now he's going to be the Suns savior thing, I still don't believe in, but I just was definitely really skeptical about a player who was the second best center on a failing Hornets team, that he'd come in and be as good as he is. And so I still have some reservations, given the fact that you look at that Cavaliers game without Evan Mobley, and he was not really very effective. Granted, almost everyone on that team wasn't very effective in that game, but you see him play well against the Pistons and against the Nets and against the Wizards. Everything has been as advertised for Nick Richards. At first, before, I was kind of upset with how much they gave up for him because it was a Kogi and a few second-round picks. Now I'm like, it's been completely worth it for the 2 second-round picks, 3, and then 1 coming back, and then a Kogi. So I've been more than pleased with it. He's been a great piece for them to have. I am still a little skeptical because it has been against subpar teams. So with Rudy Gobert coming up and Draymond Green coming up and tomorrow being Zubac, we'll see how it goes. But so far, he's been as advertised. What about you?
I think that he has basically helped bring the floor up of the team, right? I think that's kind of how 100%. You would have to put it, where, like you mentioned, that Cavs game was ugly, and this has been a portion. It's been a good portion of the schedule, I think, for him to get just settled into the team, but it has also been not exactly a murderer's row of opponents, so we'll see as things continue. What's interesting to me is, like, just to get some of the negatives out of the way before I pat him on the back, like the turnovers we expected, and they've been there. He has 7 in 4 games for the Suns as a center who's not exactly, handling the ball. He's still managed to pile up those. The free throw shooting, not positive that's going to stay where it's been. He was 7 of 9 in one game, 6 of 7 in another game. he's more of a 60-70% free throw shooter, not an 83% free throw shooter like he has been so far. And, defensively, like he does jump and leap and lurch at some balls and shot attempts that maybe he shouldn't. But those things are fine when the floor is so high and when you are, being a lob threat, a downhill threat, a rim monster the way that the Suns have just really needed forever. I mean, like JaVale McGee's the only guy I think who's filled that role in Devin Booker's career since this team started winning. DeAndre Ayton didn't even do that. So Nick Richards has done that. And I think just being 7 feet tall and being a rim protector goes a long way compared to a lot of the things that the Suns were doing, even if he does make some mistakes and everything. So I think, you mentioned I was a little skeptical about the trade package too. The more that I watch this, I'm like, this was pretty perfect. And they save money. I don't care about the second round picks. This is a guy that they have under contract for this year and next year. He's young. He brings energy, that high floor. Like, I think that they found a guy that I trust in the rotation. And it's not every, trade you make that you can lock in a guy that for sure can play. And they did that for only Josh Okogie in 3 seconds. I mean, if you think about it that way, it's hard to pick nits on it.
Yeah, and to be fair, you and I weren't really upset with the trade package per se with the 3 second-round picks. I think it was more so at the time, it was just now they have just 1 second-round pick to play with and a 2031 pick. And you and I were like, okay, well, how are you going to get extra assets? And of course, you had mentioned before, they could trade that first-round pick for exactly what they did, get other but we just kind of thought it was kind of rough to be able to see them lose all those assets, and that might have been their only play.
Cost.
Exactly. And the actual giving up the assets, it's been more than worth it. The one thing about Richards that I've not been disappointed in, but have expected to see more of is the lob threat at the rim. And I don't think that's necessarily his fault. I think it's also the Suns are getting acclimated to him just as much as he is getting acclimated to the team. There was at one point in the game where Booker early in that game threw a ball right out of bounds as Richards is pointing up in the air. Like, hey, throw it up so I can dunk it down. And I think the Suns have to, even with not just Nick Richards, but with Ryan Dunn as well, have that lob threat be a thing because what this team is lacking is some real athleticism, and losing Josh Okogie's athleticism and also his scrappiness. He's a magnet to the ball. He's running everywhere. It's been nice to see that you haven't really lost a ton of that in the effort part of the game, because Richards, what he's added to this team is exactly what I was worried about when losing Okogie, was losing a guy that gives that much effort, that's on the ground. Richards is a magnet to the ball, and it's been really great to see him hover around the rim. All of his rebounds don't even look like tough rebounds. It looks like he's just running for them and in the right place at the right time, and that was something that never happened with Nurkic or Plumlee.
Well, on that point, I looked this up. It's interesting. So up until the Wizards game, where they don't really play very big and Valanciunas isn't on the court much, and it's just sort of a mess of a team right now, where they only had 5 offensive rebounds. But the 3 previous games of the 4 Richards has played, those 3 previous games, the opponent had double-digit offensive rebounds. And when you just look at the defensive rebounding rate of the Suns in the past 4 games compared to the whole season, it's actually been worse. So really where Nick Richards has made his impact on the glass, despite piling up so many rebounds, has really been his own offensive rebounding. That's been the night and day change. Like we saw this last year. The Suns were a bad rebounding team, but Yusef Nurkic would still have games of 15, 20, 25, 30 regularly because he was the only guy on the court who was getting them. That's sort of been what it's been like with Nick Richards, which is fine. I'm not saying that those defensive rebounds don't have value. I'm just saying he really hasn't made the Suns a better defensive rebounding team at all so far. He's really just made them a better offensive rebounding team. And, that begs the question of, as they make more moves and assemble lineups and everything down the stretch run of the season. But it's just good to be able to go into a game knowing that at least you have that. No player is going to come in here and be a perfect fit for this thing, but it's just, okay, we know what Nick Richards' strengths and weaknesses are. We know he can play every night. We know he's going to be a high floor option for us. And then what? And before, it was like they didn't even have that, and that was obviously such a huge problem.
Yeah, just to kind of put a bow on all the things you had said, I think the biggest thing with Richards is just having a 7-foot guy out there who's not a complete total negative. I think all the things that you were saying is we know that Nick Richards probably still is in we're just breaking it into thirds, that second tier of centers in the NBA, where the third tier is Plumlee and the Nurkic. The Suns offense has been opened up in stretches. It hasn't still been a full game, but in stretches has showed what the Suns offense can be when there's not a complete and total net negative on the court. That is Plumlee and that is Nurkic. So it's been a slam dunk so far. Although I will say I'm going to ease up on how much praise I'm giving him, because we have a Zubac who is probably in that tier 1 of guys. If you're just ranking the 10 best centers, Draymond Green, who plays bigger than he is, Rudy Gobert, just those type of opponents coming up. I'll be excited to see, or like DA coming up soon, or Donovan Clingan, or Robert Williams. So those kind of players, I'm excited to see what he does against them. But for now, he's been everything and more.
I think Zubac in particular will be the one that I'm watching. Draymond,
Zubac,
they've been a
sure.
little worse this year, and the other ones you mentioned. But Zubac,
but I think the physicality of Draymond is what I would like to see if Richards can match that as all.
We'll see how he does. But the bigger dude like a Zubac
is, I would agree,
unique type of battle, and that'll be 100%. A fun one to watch him try to handle. I'll throw this up here really quick. I meant to throw it up earlier, but Suns have 107 minutes so far now this season with Nick Richards on the court. They have a plus 11.4 net rating. So that is kind of everything you need to know versus how ugly it had been, where all three centers, they actually were worse with those guys on the court somehow. Let's talk about one of those centers and his comments pregame that came out publicly during the game, and then were talked about post-game, kind of this narrative that overtook the Suns' win over Washington, and that is Yusef Nurkic. Next. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Of course, there are Suns odds, NBA awards odds, and more on FanDuel as well. But like I always tell you, go to the world of college basketball, get those bonus bets, and then have some fun with the football in our final weekend of that wonderful sport here coming up. But Duke is minus 10,000 at home on Monday night. Southern is minus 7,000 on the road at Mississippi Valley. You don't need to know where these schools are. You just got to win some money off of it. That's all that matters. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets, all at FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, Ben, let's keep it rolling here. Reminder to everybody to sign up for the Locked On Suns daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. Awesome analysis, information, news, all that sort of stuff. It's free for you. Supports the show big time. Okay, I have a clip, Ben, of what Bud said post-game that we can talk about, but should we just read what Nurk said to Dwayne Rankin during the pregame media availability and then go from there?
I would read the Nurkic thing first and then go to Coach Bud.
Okay. So just to give people a little bit of a peek behind the scenes as to how this type of information would come about. So technically the NBA rules say that pregame, the locker room is open. It is open from 1 hour and 15 minutes before tip-off to 45 minutes before tip-off. So that is a 30-minute block of time as guys are basically wrapping up with the on-court warm-ups that they do, but before, it's really, prep time and guys are getting ready to go out onto the court for the game. That is where Dwayne, I'm assuming, got this information over at AZ Central, and he published the story during the game because he wrote it all up, and then, it was ready to go after he had talked to Nurk pregame. So, Nurkic confirmed that it was just a bad flu, that by the time he recovered, it just wasn't worth meeting the team on the road trip. He was technically active, Ben, on Saturday for that Wizards game, just continues to be out of the rotation. And then he said it is hard to understand why he kind of is in this situation. He said, as you know, I try to do whatever they want from me. I play my role or whatever, but at the end of the day, it's the NBA. That's why young guys get to play. It's always next man up, but I'm just glad I'm not out there for just 2 minutes. I know who I am as a person and as a player. One door will open, another close, another will open eventually. That's what I'm working for and hoping for. He said he doesn't have any hard feelings against Nick Richards. And then he had sort of the big one, which was related to not really having a relationship with Mike Budenholzer. And he said, we don't have a relationship. For me, it's time to just be a pro and do the best I can, work and stay ready for whatever that might be. But there is no chaos or bringing that to this team. They already have plenty of it. Trying to be as professional as I can and work my backside off, we'll say, for something else. What did you think when you read that, Ben?
Yusef Nurkic has become DeAndre Ayton in some ways. Now, DeAndre Ayton is just lazy and has the self-awareness of a squirrel. I think the self-awareness is where Nurkic and DA really align. That quote right there where I'm not going to be a distraction, they already have enough of that, just cancels each other out right there. If you were trying not to be a distraction, you wouldn't even say that. Because you and I can think that there's issues going on in the locker room or that guys don't like each other or Kevin Durant's leadership stinks or Devin Booker's becoming too much passive or the Kobe mentality is not there anymore. Like, that's all just you and I talk. We don't actually know that's true until someone in the locker room says it. And that stuff is supposed to be kept airtight. He knew what he was doing. He was like, listen, I'm not contributing any of that. I mean, but they are already have enough of it. Couldn't stand it for a second. And then as well with the relationship side of things and think like, I want to go full Brendon Kleen on this one and just say, well, what do you mean by you don't have any relationship? It's like the Bradley Beal thing from a couple of weeks ago where it was like, what do you mean you didn't have any prior notice? Does that mean like, how far does that stretch back? I find it really hard to believe the two have never talked. I think this is him overstating his experience with Coach Budenholzer and is, again, being a distraction to the team, even though you're not being a distraction. This is the complete opposite of Beal, where Beal's like, I'm not going to be an a-hole. I'm not going to do this, whatever. Like, it is what it is. Nurk chose his words very carefully, and it was very disappointing. How did you take it?
I think we need to retire the "that brother needs help" meme. Because you cannot be the messenger of throwing shade and questioning the kind of sanity of another person and then handle yourself like this, right? Like, Yusef Nurkic has become the worst possible messenger for anything he would ever want to say because of how he has handled himself, right? And, like, you know, the idea of, you know, the fault of the chaos around this team or anything like that. First of all, nobody would have ever said it's Yusef Nurkic's fault. So the inflating himself to even be able to be important enough to this whole situation to play a role.
Oh, great point.
The big picture turmoil that the organization is in is absolutely hilarious. But aside from that, it's also just, it misses the mark of it's even less self-aware than I think people might realize, because the thing about Jusuf Nurkic is that even last year, when he played well, this is who he has always been since we've gotten to know him in the Valley. Blocking people, searching his own name on Twitter, blocking people, tweeting back at people, whatever. It's cute when you're, you know, playing above your normal level and staying healthy. Far less cute when you're in this situation. You know, having the situation with Draymond, having the situation with Grant Williams. It's nice that in those moments he kind of egged them on into some mistakes, and then the Suns benefited from that. But we're now seeing the flip side where Nurk is getting into it with Najee Marshall, and he's the one getting suspended. It's not so funny and memeable then, right? And so, one, Nurkic has contributed to the mess around this team. He is just as guilty of the boneheaded on-court mistakes and lackadaisical effort on the court that this team has been plagued with forever. That's part of why he got benched. He has always been a distraction off the court. It just only came back to hurt them finally this season. And all things considered, they've been better since they benched him. So if I were him, I would probably keep, try to maintain whatever respect and value I might have around the league as I'm looking to further my career and eventually find a new home that's actually going to give me minutes, which is probably what he's planning to try to do right now. So just the worst messenger and the least self-aware guy that I can think of that I've seen come through this Suns team in a long time.
A big, giant eye roll. It's where I relate him to DeAndre Ayton, where DA had a game against the Suns, his first game ever against the Suns, and he played pretty well, but they still lost. And Booker was like, yeah, he played well tonight. I'd like to see that kind of intensity from him every night, but DA has no self-awareness to, he thinks he's a top 5 center in the NBA, and I'm not sure he's top 20. And so with Nurkic, it's become, no, dude, you were never that guy. For a couple of years in Portland, he was good, but injury riddled. And even with Denver until Jokic took his spot at that point too, man, I started off the season defending Nurkic for his play on the court and how it's not all his fault, but the way he's conducted himself over the past month and a half has been a distraction in its own and has completely negated any sort of currency or favor he had before, which already wasn't any. So, I mean, I'm ready for this guy to be gone. I would just send him home. Or again, you know what? Maybe Budenholzer should just stop talking to him. The Dwight Schrute unshun would be great. But I'm so over it.
Yeah, I mean, he's effectively. I wanted to play the Budenholzer thing. I might as well, and we can just run this segment a little bit long. And here's what Bud had to say, and it's not even reading between the lines. It's pretty obvious that this is as ugly and as frowned upon as you and I are making it out to be.
Before the game, talking with Nurkic, and he was talking about your relationship with him, so he doesn't think you guys have one. Said you guys hadn't talked in a couple months. Maybe where are you seeing it with Nurkic in terms of your relationship with him right now?
It's never easy in this league. He hasn't played. I'm sure he's frustrated, so I respect that.
Coach, has there been conversation with him about it, or is it just kind of one of those things where you wait and see if the opportunity presents itself for him to get on the court again?
There's been conversations that have been had. There's been communication, but we got 3 or 4 guys that play the same position. We're going to go with who we think gives us our best chance. You got to earn your minutes, and that's been communicated.
And so far in the locker room, he's been a good teammate still and all of that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't have anything to, say or add to that or anything like that. So,
Hey,
Ben,
Brendon.
What?
Could you ask me if I've been a good teammate?
Have you been since you joined the Locked On Network? You've been a good teammate.
Brendon, be good. Sure.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how he answered it. He went.
It's like when you're at you go back home for the holidays or something, and then your friend is like, "Oh, how was Aunt so and so?" And you're like, "Well, yeah, she was good. It was nice to see her."
She was there.
Yeah,
it was
exactly.
like seeing. I got my brothers watch this show, so it'll be even funnier to say this. But it's like, hey, how was going over to see your brother? That's what my wife said. Like, I like his kids. His kids are cool. I'm not so fond
The
of it.
AC was at a good temperature.
The AC was on. The house was dirty, but the AC was on. He's not.
They
gonna,
gave me some water. They gave me a glass of water. Yeah.
No, he wouldn't give me a glass of water. That's even too far.
The hose, maybe. Yeah, look, I mean, this is, I was going to say, I'm not fluent in Bud speak yet. I don't know if I've covered him enough to quite say that, but this was Bud for this brother needs help. I mean, really, right? That's sort of what it was. It's just zip it, basically, right? It's so goofy. But Well, look, we'll talk plenty as the rumors continue to come out about Nurkic trades, and I mean, I think that they are very clearly trying their best to move on from this issue as they have been for the entirety of 2024, basically since he collapsed in the playoffs. But just quickly, just for the sake of addressing it, do you think that does this change how you feel about Bud at all, that this type of situation could manifest, or do you put all the blame on Nurk?
I thought about this last night. It's actually very interesting that you said that. A little about Bud, but I am so far removed from going after another head coach after what's transpired last year. Like, there has been some things with Bud, like we don't have a zone beater package, or from a couple of days ago, or this situation, or the Beal not being talked to about either the trade or the benching. There has been some things with Bud that I'm willing to like push it just a little bit, but for 95%, I'm like, yeah, this is all on Nurk. Is that fair?
It just goes to show. Yeah, I think that I would agree with all that. It goes to show that Vogel, what must have been really pumping this guy up. For all the criticisms of Vogel as a leader and a communicator that you might have, he very clearly had Nurk's ear or trust or whatever it was to get basically what will probably go down as the best season of Yusef Nurkic's career last season.
Mm-hmm.
It's honestly a miracle that Vogel got that out of him. So I'm not gonna knock Bud for not being able to do what only basically one coach has ever been able to do, which is bring the absolute best out of him on and off the court. So I'm in agreement with you there. All right, let's talk about another injury that unfortunately struck the Suns very, very early in that win over the Wizards. Ryan Dunn down. What comes next? All right, closing out the show here. One more reminder for the Locked On Suns Daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. Just type your email address in, support the show, get awesome content straight to your inbox for free. So about a minute and a half into the game, Ryan Dunn landed on Devin Booker's foot on a drive to the basket. Left ankle tweaked. He tried his best to stay in the game. It looked like a long shot. It was kind of almost one of those, Ben, where I was like, actually don't stay in. I actually don't want you to even be pushing this because of how ugly it did look. But I will remind people that Dunn had another one of these, if you remember, like in November, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And he may have missed one game, or zero.
I don't even think he missed any games. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think he missed a single game.
So quick-ish turnaround with the game on Monday night, but I could see it going that way. How do you think the Suns will handle this situation? Even if maybe he plays, but it's more of a less minute. Like what happens to the rotation and everything as this latest injury hits?
Yeah, I think that's the most interesting part of this, of like, where do you go with the starting lineup now if he misses any games? And I think there's a chance he doesn't miss any time. And I think a lot of that has to do with when you're 23, 24 years old, you rip up your ankle and 2 days later you feel fine. Like, that's just what you do at that age. Now, you may be a minutes restriction a little or an ankle brace, but I think what we're alluding to is this. We have kept Bradley Beal out of the starting lineup, and there is the argument of like, Beal should be in because he is technically the next man up. He's definitely the best player on that bench that should be in the starting lineup. But I think for continuity purposes and size and defense, if Ryan Dunn does miss any time for this team, he should 1,000% Royce O'Neal take his spot. Because of the continuity, the size, the defense, the ability to play like they've been playing recently. I think once you stick Beal in that lineup, you have a lineup that the Suns have played in that they could fall back into old habits with Beal on the floor with those three guys. So it's not that I think Beal isn't the better player. I think clearly he is. I even think now he's obviously better than Ryan Dunn. But for the fit and scheme, I think you should insert Royce O'Neal into that and keep Beal where he is now, especially while he's still getting acclimated to this bench role. That's where I would go with it. I'm not, as far as the injury, I'm 0% worried that Dunn is going to miss a full week. I bet, if anything, I think maybe he misses tomorrow and that's it. That's just the young guy persona. What about you?
It's a bad one for him to miss because Kawhi Leonard
came
back.
Yeah, Harden.
And Harden. So that's what I was going to say. It's now both of those guys that you're having to deal with. So we'll hope he doesn't even miss that. But just in general, I think the question is interesting, and it is Beal started the second half in place of Dunn on Saturday after Dunn did leave. So you would assume it will be him. I think that it is another punch in the gut to Brad to say, even once this guy gets hurt, you're still not starting. And I think that's probably what it comes down to, even if you and I are on the same page that this was also Brad's first game back from his own thing. And that is exactly illustrating the problem, and part of why I finally came around to the idea of Brad going to the bench is that it just stops you from having to constantly be adjusting to where he is in the rotation and what his role is if he's always just either he's playing or not, but he's just going to be on the bench and we'll fit him in where we can. If he's back to starting, you run into those same problems. But it's also a tough time to make the Royce O'Neal case because he has been brutal lately.
Yeah.
He's shooting 23% from 3 in January in 7 games, 28% overall. Now, he doesn't take a lot of non-threes, so that's obviously part of it, but he is on a brutal cold streak, and that I think is pretty tough. You've seen his minutes dwindle, even as a bench guy. He's not even playing the level that he was. So I would guess it will be Brad, but it honestly highlights an even more important thing, which is that this team just needs Royce to get right.
100% Royce needs to get right. The reason why I don't worry about Royce, and I know you are kind of there as well, is this is just kind of who Royce O'Neal is. He's Jay Crowder, if you want a lazy comparison, because he's as streaky as they come. He's going to hit 10 in a row, and then he's going to miss 20 in a row. Like, that's just who he is. We're in a cold streak right now in January, which is always, for some reason, the world's longest month every single year. But the calendar will turn to February in a couple of days here, and then for some reason, he'll switch into being what is a Steph Curry comparison. That's just who he is. So,
but it does go to show you that if we just kind of look at Bud's rotation decision with his minutes and what that can tell us, if Royce is not making threes, his limit goes down by a lot, or his impact goes down by a lot.
Usage,
it's limited quite a bit. Well, no, not his usage, just like his value. Yeah. Bud, the minute he went cold, Bud just started playing other guys. That shows you that Royce is not exactly the type of player that can withstand a cold streak. So when we're talking about the rest of the season, the playoffs, whatever, that is kind of the bummer of having him be a big part of your rotation, is it's just going to come and go, and you don't know when it's going to happen.
I hate to kind of change this topic on you just really quickly before we end. But I want to ask you this. How much better or not at all are the Clippers right now than the Suns? The Suns beat them twice already. One on a Kevin Durant, I think at 2 on Kevin Durant game winners. Maybe one of them was against the 76ers at home. But if they played in a 7-game series right now, who would you take?
Oh, the Clippers.
Yeah, me too. Isn't that crazy? At the beginning of the year, no Paul George. James Harden's another year older.
Kawhi's also back, so that's a big part of it.
No, but he's back. But at the beginning of the year it was. But also Kawhi, like, does anyone really think he's going to play the rest of the year? No. Probably play another month, and then he'll be out for
if you were
God
to ask
knows
me
what reason.
If I'm saying Kawhi is hurt again,
yeah, Kawhi's
my
healthy.
answer might change.
Both
but
teams
right now
healthy.
He's healthy. Yeah.
Both teams completely healthy.
Both teams healthy. The Clippers.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Hate to end on a down note, but I would agree with you that is probably the case.
The Suns have a big opportunity to make us feel like idiots if they can prove that they can beat this team, and this team has been a kryptonite for them forever. Ty Lue tells his guys whenever they play the Suns, mug them, and the Suns will deal with that, and we'll see how they deal with that, and maybe they can prove us wrong. That'll wrap us up. Hit follow or subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back Monday night after Suns Clippers with a recap episode, getting you everything you need to know about that game from Footprint Center. We'll also have more trade rumors and everything else going on this week as the show rolls on and as the week goes on. Enjoy your Monday. Enjoy the game, and we'll catch you later.